Did you have enough room?
Oh, yeah. No, I'm great. We're actually going to get closer together, but for the photos...
You're a person who takes up the whole bed, I can tell.
No, I'm just getting closer to you for this situation. Well, maybe.
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a bra off.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
I'm Lila, and I am horizontal in Wednesday's study.
I'm Wednesday Martin, and I'm horizontal with Lila on my day bed, and she is a bed hog.
And I think she's right. And if you've ever slept next to me, call in.
Just
let me know.
Let it fly. If you ever slept with Lila and she was a starfish in the bed, tell us.
People say, do what you love. And I love sleepovers, spooning, sharing, sex, storytelling, and stargazing, among other things. So I metaphorically rolled them all up in audio form and called it a podcast. Welcome into Horizontal. It's slow radio. It's intimacies of all kinds. It's us in your ears, sharing secrets. If you've been listening, you know that each recording is between 2 and 3 hours long and divided into 2 episodes. The part 1s are available anywhere you get your podcasts, and the part 2s are available just to patrons of the Horizontal Arts. Right now, when you become my patron of $5 per month or more, you get access to all the part 2s going forward and going backward to the beginning. Go to patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. It's spelled patreon.com/horizontalwithlila. And join in now, because in a month or two, some big changes are coming to the podcast and to the Patreon. When I launch Season 3, those who already have access to all the episodes will be grandfathered in at the same patronage level, with my deep gratitude for being an early listener and an early supporter. In other words, if you want access to all the episodes for $5 or more per month, become a patron now and lock that in. Fair warning, lovers. In other news, I have an announcement. I'm over the moon delighted to share the details of my Valentine's Day event, a spectacular. It's called 14 Rooms, and it will be an intimate, immersive, sensual Valentine's Day experience. I usually don't like Valentine's Day very much for obvious reasons, so I'm throwing a Valentine's that I would want to attend. A townhouse full of delights for all the senses, including four-handed massages, live erotica readings, the best hot cocoa you've ever tasted, sensual performances, sweet smells from the oven, a hot tub, and a giant teddy bear named Tiny. And that's not even what's in the 14 rooms. Each room unlocks a secret, an intimate, sensual, immersive experience. Your ticket comes with 5 tokens, which you can exchange for delights and experiences. Choose how you want to spend them, on treats, on libations, on a rendezvous or two. If you wish to collect more experiences, there are 14 rooms of delight, after all. You may purchase more tokens for $5 each, cash, from someone very prettily dressed. I'm just saying. 1 token for a treat, 2 tokens for a rendezvous. This event is for people not in relationships, and people in relationships, and people in situationships, and people who frankly don't give a damn, and everyone. Let's celebrate sensuality and loveliness all together. All the details are up on horizontalwithlila.com. Come Valentine's with us. Okay, here we go. In this episode, I lie down with Wednesday Martin, PhD, #1 New York Times bestselling author, social researcher, anthropology scholar, and one of the most knowledgeable people about female sexuality on the planet. She would demur and say that she merely interviewed 31 female sexuality experts across a range of disciplines, but I'll say that she has integrated, synthesized, and made their work widely accessible. She's managed to harmonize a vast array of historical, anthropological, scientific, and anecdotal wisdom on the subject. She is the author of many books, all in some way about quote-unquote bad women. Marlene Dietrich, Stepmothers, The Rich Mommies of the Upper East Side, and now, Adulteresses. In her new book, Untrue, Why Nearly Everything We Believe About Women, Lust, and Infidelity is Wrong, and How the New Science Can Set Us Free, she debunks fallacy after fallacy and highlights the conditions that invite female sexual autonomy to flourish. In other words, Wednesday is a woman after my own heart. I admire Wednesday's career immensely. I hope to have that kind of reach and grandiosity some soon day. She said it's going to happen. I'll just take her word for it, since her words have gotten her where she is. In this first part of our conversation, we talk about social media's crackdown on sex educators, the dark legacy of abstinence-only education, male attempts to control female sexuality and reproduction, and female counter-strategies to make an end run around them, the single worst thing to ever happen to women in history, how the transition from tribal living to nuclear family homes cost women an important power base, a surefire formula for the uniquely human female dependence on men, and how, for me, living in a sex-positive community provides a counter-formula. It's such a rich episode, anthropologically, historically, contextually. Come lie down with us in New York, New York. I have been
think
told
you're-
I starfish.
Yeah, you're a person who probably you like sleep like this. You're like, this whole bed is mine.
Can't believe she accused me of being a bed hog.
But you are.
Damn it.
It's so obvious.
I'm gonna ask my lovers. I know my ex felt that way, but
Make a list.
maybe it's
Get a list.
but maybe it's different with different
Check
lovers.
it twice.
Wouldn't that be interesting?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Depending
Although-
on my level of attraction to them, how I'm feeling about them.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is how still of a sleeper they are. Because
Oh, okay.
I used to date this horrible man who slept the
It
sleep of the just. Like he was rock still
Oh, okay.
and slept on his back,
Oh man.
and I could always sleep next to him.
Okay. Right. It wasn't an issue. He wasn't scurrying about.
He
the
didn't
bed.
move, he didn't make noise. The sleep of the just.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then if somebody moves around more, you move around more to colonize your space.
If somebody moves around more, I constantly wake up and get very angry.
Okay. You're kind of a light sleeper.
I'm extremely light
Okay,
sleeper.
got it.
So I have a theory that I'm descended from women who guarded the mouths of caves.
Yes. That's quite possibly so.
I think it quite possibly
I
is
think
so.
being a light sleeper is a really tough row to hoe in New York City.
Oh my God, I
Right?
know. The train is right outside my window, and I've learned to sleep through it.
Oh, wow. You
Yeah.
adjusted to that over time. You desensitized to the stimulus.
Yeah, because my brain understood, my body understands, that is not a threat.
Right.
But an unfamiliar noise, somebody moving right next to me, that could be a threat.
Yeah, so you better just kick that person right out.
I have often said that it would be incredible if a lover would come over, fuck me beautifully, stay and cuddle, have a little snack, and then leave so I could
Right.
sleep.
Right. You could always ask for that. That could always be your
I
list
could
of
ask for that, but
conditions.
I feel The thing is, I really like waking up next to someone, so if they could just be transported somewhere else for sleeping and then come back.
Yeah, that has its charms, right? And if they could be transported and come back, and yet come back having slept next to you all night without really having done so.
That would be ideal.
We got to
Let's
work
make
on
that
that.
teleporter.
Let's arrange that.
Alex is gonna say, but we'll ask the others as well.
Right.
I want more evidence than just me getting down on the couch or the daybed and snuggling up next to you, because I need to be close to you for this to work. There's only one microphone.
That's right. We can't deduce an entire
sleeping pattern life from such little data. I mean, you, of all people, anthropologically minded, should know better.
we do need more data points. I agree on your sleep practices, and hopefully they'll come pouring in as soon as this podcast hits the airwaves.
Yes.
Let us know.
Will you read
listeners.
me a passage from Untrue?
I would be happy to. There's a passage that I'm told you like especially.
Mm-hmm.
Let me say a little bit about Untrue, which is that it is a reconsideration of female infidelity. That's why it's called Untrue, right? Untrue is a euphemism we used to use for women who were refusing monogamy, either on the DL or openly. But it's also a play on words, because I'm looking at science about female sexuality that's false and that has been revisited. But the book is part first-person experience and part data.
And you know I love the first-person experience, of course.
The first-person experience, and I get it. So I'm going to read from the introduction of Untrue, a passage that I'm told that you like. So the context here is that I considered myself, and was, a catastrophe at monogamy throughout my 20s. It was a real struggle. There were a lot of awkward scenes and
tears. As in you were trying.
I was trying and consistently getting sexually bored at the 1 or 2 year mark, and rather than having a conversation about it, which really wasn't an option in the culture at the time. It was an option if you were a gay man or if you were in an open marriage or relationship, but it wasn't in common practice to have monogamy discussions when I was among heterosexuals when I was in my 20s living in New York City. So that's the context. So I'll read you the passage that you like. So after being a catastrophe at monogamy in my 20s, it was a relief when in my mid-30s I found someone I lusted for and loved and could imagine settling down with, someone with whom I could have children and a life, someone to whom I could stay true. It calmed the sexual static in my brain for a time. I was soon pregnant, and then exhausted by the demands of caring for an infant who became a toddler, who became a preschooler, and then the whole thing began again with a second child. But when the heaviest lifting phase of motherhood subsided, when the nursing and the late nights were over, and I came back to myself, a grown-up in command of her own mind and body again, I discovered that although I wore a wedding ring on my left hand, not much had changed. My husband and I were thankfully back to having sex I enjoyed and plenty of it. So why, in my mind, was I faithless? I had fantasies I did not want to share, daydreams that were more graphic than soft focus and romantic. I liked sexually explicit novels and movies as much as I had before, maybe even more so. And I entertained crushes on wholly inappropriate objects, men who were married, or too young for me, or too old for me. I had crushes on women, too, even though I was pretty sure I wasn't gay or even bisexual. What kind of a wife and mother felt this way? I was older now, and my work as a writer afforded me some autonomy in my intellectual and professional pursuits. I queried therapists and open-minded mommy friends and experts, and turned again to anthropology and primatology, particularly the writing of feminist anthropologists and the new game-changing sex research being done by women. What was sexually normal for women? Why was it so hard to be true? My list of questions was long. I wanted to know, who is the woman who steps out, and why does she do it? Are her motivations different from a man's? What separates the woman who actually cheats from those who merely think about it? How do women who stray experience their infidelity and live with it? And why do we as a society feel the way we do about these women? Riveted, triggered, convinced that they must be contained, corrected, and punished, that something must be done about them. Finally, I wondered, what larger lessons can the adulteress teach us about female longing and lust, about our fixation on women we deem deceptive, and about the past, present, and future of partnership and commitment? I also wanted to know how things had changed for young women since I had been one, and how those changes were impacting the lives of women across a range of ages, socioeconomic groups, and identities.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. My pleasure to read you a bedtime story.
Oh my gosh, there's so much there. Those are such powerful questions.
And isn't it funny how what I get into in the book is between the time I had the idea to write the book and I actually started writing it, I realized, oh, wait a second. There's a whole culture of people who don't even really remember what the adulteress was because they're into consensual non-monogamy. They have a different take entirely.
Right.
And the ground has been shifting under my feet, and I haven't even noticed it.
They grew up with less constrictions about gender expression. And
That's right. Less binary thinking and less buying into the script of infidelity and fidelity.
adulteress really
Terms
sounds...
I don't like, being, the ultimate binary. People your age don't buy into that as much as people my age used to, and people in previous generations really bought into it a lot.
The word adulteress and even the word infidelity sound outdated.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the point of the historical cover of the book, too, to show, like, we're going to engage with the entire history of representing and often misrepresenting female sexual autonomy. I really love the word adulteress. It's so lush and delicious and rebellious. And it also has a kind of, it has kind of a diagnostic ring to it.
Diagnostic?
Right? Yeah, it's like adulteress. It sounds like something from the DSM or a medical diagnosis. Yeah, well, to me, it has a taxonomic ring to it. It's a very almost scientific term, like the term tribadist is the term that Victorians used for lesbians.
Whoa, I've never heard that one.
Yeah.
Tribadist? Tribidist?
Uh-huh.
Tribadist.
Right. So adulteress is sort of part of that lexicon of judging female behavior, and I wanted to excavate it and have a look at it. And yes, adulteress is a really dated term, and I think it can teach us a lot about, how far we've come and how far we haven't come when we think about female sexual autonomy, including women saying, I might be married to you or in a long-term partnership with you, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to have sex with other people.
I've been thinking about this so much. It feels like we are in both the most progressive and the most backward time that has ever been. It feels like a time rife with paradox.
Yes, on the one, I know exactly what you mean, and I think a lot of people are feeling that right now.
Is it that it was always there, but now it's so much more obvious because of our political settings that we have people coming out of the woodwork to show their misogyny, to show their true beliefs?
I get into this a little bit in Untrue, and I think you and I have talked about it before too, that one way of looking at this is that at the same time that Trump emboldened people who were perhaps zipping it when Obama was president, when we had an intellectual black leader of our country
so dreamy.
As the signifier and reality of power and as the embodiment of power.
And so classy. The contrast is so disheartening.
Right. So when he was the signifier and reality of ultimate male power. There were plenty of people voicing, racist sentiment about that. But it was when Obama left office and Trump came into office, it seems, that those people felt really emboldened to speak without censoring themselves. Because now the ultimate signifier of male power and of power
is bigoted and misogynistic and xenophobic. And
so Trump has unleashed those voices. And at the same time, he's unleashed millions of voices of resistance. So
right.
It makes sense that you have this feeling, and that so many of us do, that we're living in a moment that is at once unprecedentedly progressive and resistant and liberated, and at the same time we're living through a terrible backlash against all the progress that we felt, rightfully so, I think, that we had made. It was a real repudiation for me when Trump was elected of what I thought we had accomplished.
Yes, me too. I cried all night. The Sesta Fosta legislation is now trickling is really not the right word, has now turned on, is what I'm going to say, sex educators. And every day I hear about somebody's account has been frozen, taken down for even mentioning sex, for giving accurate sex education. And it's so unbelievably inane to bar people from getting accurate, because where are they going to turn now? They're going to turn to porn, and they're going to learn from inaccurate images.
Yeah.
I'm not sure where I stand. Patreon froze my account. For 6 weeks, I couldn't access my patron funds because, well, they didn't actually tell me why. They were like, we've frozen your account. Like, our trust and safety team needs to review it because it violates our policy. And I read the policy. The only thing I could have possibly violated in that policy was implied nudity.
Implied nudity.
Implied nudity.
That's like subjunctive noise.
What in the fuck
like
is implied nudity? I'm wearing clothes, and that's
and
implied nudity, right? Underneath that,
underneath your clothes, you're naked.
I'm naked.
Oh my God!
So I've implied nudity, right?
Everyone in the world, every day when we get up and go to work, we're implying nudity. That's a serious crime.
So backwards and so shocking. And I started going down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out why this was. And it goes to the credit card companies. And the credit card companies have these extremely backward obscenity clauses.
Oh, no. Really?
That they are vague. So that they can interpret them in any way they want and shut people down when they want to.
They give themselves a lot of leeway to retain control of your account.
Exactly. And
your life.
Of course. And I did some research into that. I learned that the reason why they do that, and the reason why they have what they call high risk. Oh, what is it? High risk. It's what porn companies use. They have to use a high risk credit account or something.
I see.
Because what has the most reversal of charges?
So basically, they're looking into whether you're a pornographer. And they have a wide definition, I presume.
An unbelievably wide brush they are painting.
I want to say that it's hard to believe that they don't have better things to do with their time. But I'm sure there's a profit motive here. I want to just say a couple things. I mean, I share your sense of alarm about this development for a couple of reasons. The first thing I wanted to say, though, is that, Instagram and social media, they serve as an ecological niche where a lot of things happen. And one of the things that can happen on social media is that we can work against the legacy that is really deep that was begun in the Reagan era, when Reagan attached legislation to another bill which specified that sex education had to be abstinence-only sex education.
That was Reagan?
This was decades ago, and we're still all living the legacy
the aftermath,
of abstinence-only sex education, and in a shocking number of
teenage pregnancies.
of states, there's still abstinence-only sex education.
Right.
And Mal Harrison is a really great person to talk to about this. She's very knowledgeable. She's developing a sex ed curriculum, as are many other activists, to deal with this. But this legislation is still powerful and it's still impacting our lives. So that's the first thing I wanted to say about Sesta Fossa.
She
that
actually
it's too
gave
bad.
me
Yeah.
and my ex a few sessions. I worked with her briefly.
Oh, great. Well, then you know her, and you can talk to her about this, and other people can look at Mal's work and writing on the topic of how catastrophic it is that we have abstinence-only sex education still going on. The other thing that's interesting that you reminded me of is not too long ago, Pinterest stopped allowing women to post what the Pinterest deemed sexually graphic images. Remember this?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I just know
so
that it's Facebook is
Pinterest was
doing that now.
Women were using Pinterest as an ecology where they could curate their own sexual fantasies and sort of image boards of their own desire. And
Like a desire map.
and I think you know how Pinterest is kind of gendered female. Men and women both use it, but it skews in the popular imagination as being a more female space. And that Pinterest does have a lot of women users, and they were using it against the grain. They were using it instead of pinning recipes and fashion, they were using it, as women will, as a place to express what they wanted sexually, what they desired, what turned them on. So it was a great sort of laboratory for looking at and thinking about female desire. And that was shut down. And there were a lot of articles have been written about the fact that it happened and what it means and why, it's really a shame, and how it's part of a larger effort to regulate female sexuality and control it. Hey, nothing new. It's been going on for 10,000 years now. And Pinterest is just really the latest sort of enactment of this form of social control of female sexuality.
When I went back to look at what could possibly have been implied nudity, because it was in my public posts. They said something in your public posts. What my public posts were the show notes for all the episodes. And that meant that what was visible was a photo of my guest. And the only thing that I could think of was there's one where one of my guests is wearing lingerie. Fiona's wearing black, strappy, dominatrixy looking lingerie.
Also known as fashion.
Yeah. And in another one, a woman is wearing underwear and is in shibari, a rope suspension.
Right. Speaking of which, Kiss Me Deadly Doll, one of my favorite IG accounts. She's a shibari artist. Sorry, that's a little bit of a tangent, but
No, go. Kiss Me Deadly Doll. I want to follow her.
yeah, wonderful, beautiful images of her rope artistry. I'm very interested in the way social media has become a space where women can curate images of themselves and have control over what they put out about themselves, about who they are sexually. Brian E. Cole talks a lot about how important it was when iPhones suddenly had this function where you could reverse the camera, right, and take a photo of yourself. She has some really
And you could
smart
control the
observations
angle
about
and
that. And
the depth of field.
and you could control your sexuality and the images,
literally
of
the
your
frame
sexuality, literally the frame.
with which your sexuality was gazed upon. You were
Right.
making the frame. You were painting the frame.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes so much sense.
So that this is now being regulated, that this space is now being regulated, what we're going to see is that women will come up with a counter strategy, because this is what happens. There are attempts to control, and then women make an end run, around those attempts to
A
control.
workaround.
That's what all of sexual selection and human evolution has been. male attempts to control female sexuality and reproduction, and female strategizing to make an end run around that. And so I think that in a very real way, the battles over sexually explicit images on social media hook into longer struggles to control our sexuality, and then for us to attempt to make end runs around that control.
What do you think is so actually scary about female sexuality? That we have this lengthy history of control.
I think what frightens a lot of people in the industrialized West is not so much female sexuality, but female sexual autonomy is remarkably threatening to people.
But why?
A lot of anthropologists trace it back to a moment 10 to 12,000 years ago when we transitioned to not just agriculture. There are plenty of agricultural settings where women do really well, but when we switched to plow agriculture.
Oh.
And I get into this a lot in Untrue about just how Helen Fisher, the anthropologist, has said that the plow is the single worst thing that ever happened to women. And I concur with her.
Wow.
And read Untrue to find out all about it, the specifics of it. But the big picture is that with the development of plow agriculture came the belief that men should be outside and women should be inside. Plow agriculture prioritized upper body strength, one of the few advantages that men do have over women anatomically. And it also gave rise to the notion of property and perimeter defense and women as property. So the history of fearing female sexual autonomy is one that we can locate as having a really important moment and perhaps being born in the moment when we started using plows to till the soil. Pretty weird, crazy idea.
So is the premise here, if she has autonomy, she will no longer stay inside and cook for me?
There's that, and then there's also fears about progeniture, which is inheritance. So when suddenly
who gets the land?
Yes, when we had this idea about property coming into being, so did the idea of inheriting property, and the thought is that men then became concerned about paternity, and that they were handing down their property to only their own children. So this is the thinking among a lot of anthropologists about how we got to this place where it became so important for us to control female sexuality. And we've used various coercive tactics and strategies to control female sexuality. So everything from lethal violence, right? Places where women are stoned to death for being sexual, or in the United States where women are
publicly shamed.
Publicly shamed is the other end of the spectrum, but there are plenty of women in the United States who don't have the privilege of saying, I think I'd like to be poly or open or non-monogamous, because they will get beaten severely for it or shot. Women in this country who exercise sexual autonomy by having affairs or by leaving men, just leaving them, face really dramatically increased risks of lethal and near lethal violence. So there's that end of the spectrum of controlling female sexuality. And then the other end of the spectrum, as you said, slut shaming, judging, gossiping, bullying. These are all ways that we've sought to control female sexuality.
This shift that you're talking about, when the concept of land as property comes into play,
and women as property,
seems to be a source of many other far-ranging problems that make the nuclear family unit the center of what people are willing to work for, care about, protect, and defend. So that we then wind up, if we don't like our family, don't connect with our family, have different ideology from our family, don't want to be with our family, then are isolated from that nucleus of people who are designated, let's say, to protect us and care for us.
Yeah.
And leaves many, many people feeling deeply isolated, without community, without support.
Yeah.
And then we get this epidemic of loneliness that's happening now.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, I think that social media, on the one hand, is a great way for people to, as we've said, it's a wonderful ecology in a lot of ways, but it's not real connection.
It's a tool. It can
I like to say that social media
bridge.
seems like a campfire, but then you go and sit there and you see
It's
that
not warm.
there aren't actual real people around the campfire, and it's not, the fire isn't throwing off any warmth. You know, the campfire used to be where we sat in a community
Shared
and
stories.
felt warmth and connection. Exactly.
Laughed.
So social media
Marveled at the universe.
Yeah, social media is a thing that gives us the impression that we're countering loneliness, but in many ways, if we abuse it, it makes us lonelier. That's one point.
Lonelier.
The other thing I wanted to say is I agree with you about the loneliness and the isolation. Another way of viewing that is that when we started living in nuclear families and we left our extended families, women lost a really important power base. Our families might drive us crazy. We might disagree with them. But if you're female, having your kin nearby is a great hedge against male control. And you'll see in many traditional hunter-gatherer populations who are living, as many anthropologists believe we all did, in the Pleistocene, you will see in many of those societies, women have the power to vote with their feet, as the anthropologist Sarah Hrdy says. If a man is abusing a woman, if a woman simply doesn't want to be in a relationship anymore, she can vote with her feet and leave without risking lethal violence, because she has her kin nearby to not only to protect her from lethal violence, but to help her with child rearing, to literally give her a bed to sleep in, and to help provision her kids and provision hers. If you want to disempower a woman, take her away from her kin and forbid her from working, and then give her some dependent offspring.
Oh my God.
And that is the formula
for repression.
For female dependence on men. And that's a formula that holds, if you look at the worldwide ethnographic data, you see that if women are around their kin or fictive kin, you can have a community of friends.
Chosen family.
Who act as chosen kin. Your chosen kin, some people call it fictive kin. We can also call it elective kin. Your community can be that for you. But if you don't have that, and you don't have a way of supporting yourself, and you have dependent offspring,
oh my gosh,
then the stage is
Recipe
perfectly
for
set for unique female dependence on males, which we only see in the human species. We don't see it in other animal species.
And I was thinking about how I can possibly be so autonomous. And the fact that I live in an intentional community, and I think this resurgence of intentional communities, you can call them communes, but it's an outdated term, in Israel they're called kibbutzes. But this, obviously, it is a return to a more tribal way of living.
Right.
The fact that I have this group of people to go home to who share my values, who believe in my right to be autonomous. Also, the fact that we don't live with our partners makes a huge difference, right? Because I'm not worried that, I'm talking about the economic dependence part, I'm not worried that if I break up with someone, I won't be able to pay my rent, because I live with a lot of people to keep my rent low.
Yeah.
And that's not true for everybody. Some people have more expensive situations in these intentional communities or these co-living communities. But it makes a difference, right? The resource sharing makes such a difference.
Yeah, it's very important, the resource sharing, because what we see in terms of female autonomy and sexual autonomy, because what we see when we look at the worldwide ethnographic data is that anywhere women have really high rates of labor force participation and really high rates of political participation, they will also have high rates of autonomy. They'll be much more likely to be autonomous, including sexually autonomous. I mean, having resources, having kin or elective kin who have your back, not fearing that you'll be out on the street if you exercise autonomy makes it much more likely that you can be autonomous,
Of course.
including that you can do what you'd like sexually and not feel married, if you will, to an exclusive pair bond for life. Meanwhile, if you're economically dependent on a man, which many women in this country are, because the ratio is really pretty alarming, by which white men out-earn women of color and white women as well. That's a situation that's ripe for economic dependency, which means having less sexual autonomy. It's all linked. Money, political participation, having kin around you, your sexual behavior, they are all linked to each other. And that's why feminists used to say, and some still do, that the personal is political.
Right.
When it comes to female sexuality, there's nothing more political than your sexuality. If you're a woman, it's linked to all these other factors that I just talked about, economic factors, social factors.
I just asked my patrons in my secret Facebook group if they thought desire was political. And we got into a very interesting conversation. And mostly they did not. But we weren't talking about the economic factors and all this.
I think people want to have this fantasy that their desires emanate just from them, right?
Right.
Especially our sexual desires, which are so personal. And of course, we're creatures of biology as much as we're creatures of culture, and our sexuality happens at that intersection. I like to say that female sexuality happens at the confluence of the clitoris and the culture.
Right.
But when you ask whether...
Between the culture and the clit,
yeah, so
where does she lie?
when people resist the idea that desire is political, I'm not sure exactly what the people in your discussion group, how they were defining desire and how they were defining whether
Exactly.
it was
And then
political
I was
but
clarifying my question, which is to say, is our sexual desire shaped by forces, unconscious forces? And obviously it's some and some not, right? Because it's never nature or nurture. It's
right,
both.
it's both. That's been a recent development in a lot of fields, whether it was anthropology or biology. There used to be all this arguing about nature versus nurture, right? Were people the way they were because of biology, or were they the way they were because of culture? And now there's basic agreement that these things matter. We're creatures of biology who live in a culture, and we have to look at both factors. And it seems obvious from this standpoint.
Right. It seems astonishing that they would argue that it was an or rather than an and.
It was a standoff for a very long time. So anyway, that's a little bit of a tangent. But
So now you are one of the most knowledgeable women in the world about female sexuality.
oh my goodness. Well, okay, let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. I was lucky enough to interview 31 experts from many different fields who are very knowledgeable about female sexuality. And then I got to look at dozens and dozens of studies and books on the topic. So I am lucky that other people shared so much of their expertise with me, and I'm trying to cross it over.
You've soaked in an incredible amount of knowledge about it, but at one point you were a small human who didn't know anything about sexuality. So how did you learn about it as a small human?
Wow, I'm trying to remember when I actually learned about sex, because I think it's kind of a process that unfolds, right? You're very little and you're touching your body and somebody tells you not to. You see an image.
Did you get that?
I can't remember being told not to touch my body. No, luckily for me. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is we talk about this moment when, as a kid, we learned about sex, but I think that the learning is a very gradual unfolding process.
And a series of moments, of course.
And a series of moments, which I think we need to think about that more. But not us, you and me, but as a culture. I remember somebody in the playground telling me, about heterosexual sexual intercourse. And I could not believe that it was true. I was maybe in third grade or second grade, and it was an older girl at school who told me, and I marched home after school and demanded that my mother confirm that this couldn't possibly be the case, that this could not possibly happen. And she tried to keep a straight face, and she told me that indeed it did happen, and I expressed great disgust. And to her credit, she said, well, actually, people like it a lot. It feels very good.
All right, go mom.
Yeah, so that was a great thing
So
for
then
her to say in the face of my complete horror when I was a
Right.
kid. She reframed it.
In that moment, in that instance, the confirmation of the truth of heterosexual sex and an affirmation of pleasure.
Yeah,
And I
that
feel
was
like-
big. That was big and important. And you know what? Here's why, another reason that I was lucky. It was the 70s. It was before abstinence-only sex education. It was before the Reagan backlash, second wave feminism, and activists like Florence Kennedy and Gloria Steinem had set the groundwork and said that female personal experience, including sexuality, was political and important.
This episode of Horizontal was edited by Chad Michael Snavely. He is findable on the interwebs at chadmichael.com. Shauna Shea drew my curvaceous cover art. She is hireable on 99 Designs. And my sweet little intro music was scored by Alan Markley. He's on Instagram as Plastic Cannons. Get your tickets for 14 rooms on horizontalwithlila.com or through the link in my Instagram bio, and get your Valentines on with us. Next week's episode with Wednesday, episode 66, is available to patrons only. Go to patreon.com/horizontalwithlila and become a patron of the Horizontal Arts. No matter where I am in the world or throughout my day, the minute I get notice of a new patron, I do an elaborate happy dance. Tom, Alicia, and Cecilia, thank you for being my newest patrons. I did happy dances at the tea shop, on the subway, and in bed. And an extra bit of horizontal gratitude to Gemma for raising her pledge this month with these sweet words. Number 1, after hearing in a recent episode referencing another patron upping their patronage, and number 2, then recognizing that my love for this show hasn't stopped growing, and number 3, then finally having words to explain a friendship in my life thanks to Bevan, we help each other do our soul work, I realized it's time to up my patronage too. This show teaches me so much about what it is to be human and helps me figure out ways to do it better. Thank you. Thank you, Gemma. I'm heading down to Miami for a week to soak up some sunshine, I hope, and to do some recording. So if you have any folks down there who would be great candidates for horizontality, let me know. Until next time, may we have someone to love, something to do, and lots of things to look forward to. Thanks for becoming horizontal.
And tell everybody who listens to your podcast. that
Right.
about you.
Tell all my potential lovers.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And just your
Thanks
friends
for that.
who haven't seen this hoggish side of you. That you're a bed hog.
I'm a sharer, but not really with my
You're,
bed.
you know, it used to be a thing to really like scare parents out of co-sleeping, right? But I kind of had anthropology in my back pocket, and I was like, I'm going to co-sleep because it's normative worldwide. We're here in Great Britain are like the only places where people don't co-sleep, right? So I was like, I'm going to co-sleep
really?
with my kids. Okay, but meanwhile, the reason I couldn't co-sleep with my kids is because they're like you. They like sleep like this. So there'd be this little tiny baby in the middle of a California king bed, taking up the whole bed.